My parents made me work 3 jobs just to afford food while they went on cruises without me. One afternoon, my mom snapped, "Stop acting like you're a victim," but that day, I found a hidden letter that changed everything. They didn't expect what happened next. I was sitting at the kitchen table, trying to stretch a half-cooked packet of ramen into something resembling dinner, when my mom dropped her designer bag with a loud thud. "You need to stop acting like you're some kind of victim, Brielle," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to slice through the silence. I didn't even flinch. Just stirred my noodles. Upstairs, my dad was dragging their suitcases into the hallway, laughing about how he'd barely survived another week of all-you-can-drink cocktails. That was the moment I realized it wasn't just selfishness. It was cruel. And minutes later, when I found a dusty letter hidden under a piece of furniture, everything changed. They never thought I'd have the power to turn my life around. But they were wrong. When I was younger, I used to think there was something wrong with me, like I was just born lacking whatever it was that made other kids lovable to their parents. I watched my classmates in Asheville talk about family vacations, Christmas traditions, inside jokes with their moms and dads. My reality was different. By the time I was 14, I was the housekeeper, the grocery shopper, the emotional punching bag. Marjorie and Philip, my parents, weren't outright abusive, not in the way you read about, but they were neglectful in a way that was almost worse. Subtle. Death by 1,000 cuts. They loved being seen as fun, spontaneous people. They hosted wine nights for their country club friends, posted curated photos of their travels, bragged about how independent I was to anyone who'd listen. Independence wasn't a choice. It was survival. When I graduated high school, there was no talk of college funds or gap years. Instead, Mom handed me a list of household expenses and said, "If you're old enough to be an adult, you're old enough to contribute." By contributing, she meant to pay for the groceries, the gas bill, my own car insurance. And if I wanted anything extra, clothes, doctor visits, shampoo, that was on me too. So I got to work. 3 jobs. No vacations. No nights out. I watched the seasons change from the fogged windows of Buddy's diner and the neon lights of the Stop and Save gas station. I missed birthdays, funerals, weddings. I barely slept. Meanwhile, my parents lived like teenagers with platinum cards. Photos of them clinking champagne glasses in Paris. Selfies with dolphins in Key West. A spontaneous weekend at a ski lodge in Colorado. Sometimes they didn't even tell me they were leaving, just vanished for days, the house eerily silent except for the hum of the broken fridge I couldn't afford to fix. The worst part was, no one knew. Out in public, they looked like the picture-perfect middle-class couple with a hard-working daughter. I didn't want to be the girl who aired dirty laundry, so I kept my mouth shut. Until that afternoon. When they burst through the door after their latest cruise, they were tanned, happy, and loud. The sharp smell of sunblock and alcohol followed them into the house. I was sitting at the kitchen table, trying to ignore the gnawing ache in my stomach from skipping breakfast and lunch. The fridge was almost empty again. I'd bought what I could, but my last paycheck was stretched thinner than ever. Mom dropped her Louis Vuitton bag with an exaggerated groan. "You need to stop acting like you're some kind of victim, Brielle," she snapped, looking me up and down like I was something stuck to the bottom of her shoe. I didn't reply. There was no point. Words slid off her like rain off a waxed car. I watched her walk upstairs, heels clicking, laughing at something Dad muttered about the idiot staff on the cruise ship. I stirred my ramen slowly, feeling something inside me grow hard and cold. After a while, I got up to clean. I wasn't sure why, habit, maybe. Keeping busy kept me from thinking too much. As I bent to sweep under the hutch in the dining room, my broom snagged on something. A yellowed envelope. Curious, I tugged it free. It was addressed to me. From Grandpa Walter. My heart stopped. He died almost 7 years ago, a sudden stroke while watering his garden. I hadn't known he left anything for me. No one had mentioned it. Mom had acted like the funeral was just an annoying chore to get through. Hands trembling, I tore open the envelope. Inside was a neatly folded letter and a photocopy of his will. The letter was short, written in Grandpa's crabby but familiar handwriting. Dear Brielle, if you're reading this, it means your parents didn't do right by you like I hoped they would. I've set something aside for you. It's not much, but it's yours, free and clear. I made sure of that. Don't let anyone tell you differently. Love you forever, Grandpa Walter. My eyes flew to the will. My breath caught. Grandpa had left me his cabin up in Banner Elk, along with a savings account, small by some standards, but enormous to me, over $48,000. $48,000. It wasn't the money that hit me hardest, though. It was the realization that they had hidden it from me. Buried it under furniture, literally. And left me to scrape by, to starve, while they partied across the globe. I stood there shaking, the letter flapping in my hand like a flag in a storm. I sat down heavily in the chair, the old wood creaking under my weight. The letter trembled in my hands, and I felt the air thicken around me. I kept rereading it, trying to make the words mean something different. Anything different. But they didn't. Grandpa had tried to protect me. He'd left me something that could have changed my life years ago. And my parents. They hadn't just hidden it. They'd stolen time from me. Years. Memories. Opportunities. I could have gone to college. I could have lived somewhere else. I could have been someone else. Instead, I had 3 dead-end jobs, no savings, no friends, and no future I could see beyond the fluorescent lights and stained uniforms. And they had smiled through it all. Smiled, and posed for pictures, and told everyone what a hard little worker I was. I don't know how long I sat there, but the sun dipped low, and the shadows stretched across the kitchen. The smell of the house, musty, stale air and burnt coffee grounds, made me sick to my stomach. Upstairs, I could hear the shower running, and my dad cursing about the water pressure. My mom's voice floated through the air vents, sharp and laughing, talking to someone on speakerphone about a fabulous new Mediterranean cruise deal. They were already planning their next escape. Something inside me hardened. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just folded the letter neatly, tucked it back into the envelope, and slipped it into my coat pocket. My movements felt slow, deliberate. Like I was underwater. I was done pretending. I grabbed my car keys off the hook by the door. The beat-up Honda Civic rattled when I started it, but it got me where I needed to go. I drove straight to Banner Elk, a sleepy mountain town about 2 hours north, tucked away from the bustle of Asheville. It was late by the time I pulled into the long dirt driveway of Grandpa's cabin, but I didn't care. The place looked exactly the same. A little more weather-worn, maybe. The paint on the porch had peeled, and the shutters hung crooked, but it was beautiful to me. A small wooden haven surrounded by towering pines. I found the spare key exactly where Grandpa had always kept it, under the loose stone by the steps. When I opened the door, the smell hit me first, cedar and old books. Home. I turned on the lights, one by one. Dust danced in the beams like tiny ghosts. There were still photos of me and Grandpa on the mantel, yellowed with time but intact. His arm around me the summer I turned 10. A fishing trip when I was 12. Christmas morning, both of us were wearing ridiculous matching sweaters. I slid down onto the couch and let out a long, shuddering breath. For the first time in years, I felt safe. Not happy. Not hopeful yet. But safe. And I knew exactly what I needed to do next. I spent the next 3 days cleaning. Scrubbing the windows, dusting the furniture, hauling garbage bags of old newspapers and junk to the curb. I found tools in the shed and patched up the broken porch railing myself. I changed the locks. Set up a P.O. box in Banner Elk. Called the small local bank where Grandpa had held the account. After some paperwork and awkward questions, they confirmed the funds were still there. $48,000. It wasn't just money. It was freedom. It was a lifeline. I withdrew enough to live on for a few months, just enough. I wasn't going to blow it. I was going to build something. I found a job at a local bookstore within the week. It paid less than the diner, but it didn't matter. I could breathe here. I could think. I didn't tell my parents anything. I didn't answer their texts, which, for a while, were just casual, pick up milk. The electricity bill is due. Don't forget to mow the lawn. As if nothing had changed. Then the tone shifted. Where are you? Why isn't the house cleaned? We just got back and you're not home? Answer your phone, Brielle. Now. I didn't. A week later, they showed up at the bookstore. I was organizing a shelf when I saw them through the glass, Marjorie in her high heels, Philip in his usual khakis and golf shirt, storming across the parking lot like suburban tornadoes. I ducked behind a stack of self-help books, heart hammering, but it was too late. They barged in, spotted me, and made a beeline for the counter. Where the hell have you been? My dad barked, loud enough that 2 customers looked up, startled. Marjorie leaned over the counter, her manicured nails tapping a furious rhythm. You think you can just disappear? After everything we've done for you, she hissed. I kept my voice even. I'm not your housekeeper. I'm not your ATM. Philip scoffed. Don't be dramatic. Marjorie's face twisted. We let you live with us for free, I laughed. I actually laughed. A dry, humorless sound. Free? You mean after I paid your bills and worked myself into the ground? They blanched. Not because they felt guilty, but because someone might overhear. They were losing control of the narrative. You owe us, Marjorie spat finally. Everything you have is because of us. I reached into my bag and pulled out the copy of Grandpa's letter. I slid it across the counter like a final play in a poker game. Marjorie's hand shook as she grabbed it. She read it once. Twice. Her face went pale. Where did you find this? She whispered. It was hidden under the hutch, I said quietly. Along with a will that said Grandpa left me the cabin. And the money. Philip's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. You had no right, Marjorie hissed. No right? I said. To what? Something that was legally mine? Something he left me because he knew what kind of people you were? For the first time in my life, they didn't have anything to say. Just silence. A raw, ugly silence that filled the whole store. Finally, Marjorie squared her shoulders. Fine, she snapped. Take your little shack and your pennies. See how far it gets you. You'll come crawling back. They always do. I smiled. A small, sad smile. Don't wait up. And I turned my back on them. They stormed out. No apology. No remorse. Just the bruised pride of people who thought they could never be beaten at their own game. For a while, I thought maybe that would be the end of it. Wishful thinking. About 3 days after that confrontation, things started happening. Little things at first. The power company called me, saying there were issues verifying my account for the cabin. The water bill suddenly quadrupled. The mailbox at my new P.O. box started filling with strange notices, subscription magazines I never ordered, catalogs, credit card offers under weird misspellings of my name. Then one afternoon, the bookstore manager, a soft-spoken woman named Elaine, pulled me into the back office. She looked uncomfortable. I got a strange call this morning, she said, folding her hands on the desk. Someone claiming to be a family member. Saying you had a history of theft. I blinked. What? Elaine shook her head quickly. I didn't believe them, obviously. They refused to leave a name. But I thought you should know. I thanked her, but my hands were shaking when I left the office. The next week, my old landlord from Asheville left me a furious voicemail. Apparently, someone had called him pretending to be me, trying to cancel the rental agreement on my old place, even though I'd already officially moved out and handed in my keys. I could piece it together easily enough. It was them. They couldn't control me anymore. They couldn't guilt me into coming back. So now they were trying to wreck my life from a distance. For a moment, a small, crap moment, I almost caved. I almost drove back to Asheville, sat down in the kitchen I used to scrub, and tried to reason with them. Explain how much they had hurt me. How much I needed them to stop. But I knew better. You can't explain empathy to people who lack it. You can't teach regret to people who never believed they did anything wrong. They didn't miss me. They missed the convenience of me. So I tightened everything. I set up new security questions on all my accounts. Froze my credit. Paid for a cheap security camera on the front porch of the cabin. Told the bookstore to direct all strange calls to me personally. I blocked their numbers. I blocked them on every platform. I became, for the first time in my life, untouchable. It wasn't easy. God, it wasn't easy. Some nights, I would sit on the sagging porch swing, listening to the frogs down by the creek, feeling like a ghost. Like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left only the shell. I grieved. Not just the parents I wished I'd had, but the life I should have had. The lost time. The years I spent trying to earn love that was never going to exist. At the bookstore, Elaine was patient with me. She never pried. Just kept giving me extra shifts when I wanted them, and telling me, with a wink, that I was the only employee who knew how to alphabetize properly. Slowly, things started to stitch back together. I found myself smiling sometimes without forcing it. I started baking again, something I hadn't done since I was 16. The cabin smelled like cinnamon and apples. I took long walks through the woods. Let the cold, sharp mountain air burn through the numbness. I was living on my own terms. Quietly. And for a while, it was enough. Until one morning, about 3 months after the bookstore confrontation, I got a knock on my door. The man standing there wore a navy blazer and held a clipboard. "Are you Brielle Caldwell?" he asked, voice flat. "Yes?" "You've been served," he said, and handed me a thick manila envelope. Before I could ask anything else, he turned and walked back to his car. I stood there in my slippers, the cold porch wood biting into my skin, staring at the envelope like it might explode. With a sinking feeling, I opened it. Inside was a summons. Philip and Marjorie Caldwell were suing me. The words on the page blurred as I read them. I had to sit down on the porch steps, the cold seeping into my legs. The lawsuit was absurd. They were claiming that I had stolen property from them, namely, the cabin and the money Grandpa had left me. That I had forged documents and withheld familial assets. It would have been laughable if it didn't come with the threat of court dates, legal fees, and months of stress. I sat there, shaking the papers in my lap. It wasn't about the money for them. It was about control. It always was. They couldn't stand the idea that I had something they couldn't touch. That I had a life without them. For a few hours, I panicked. I cried. I screamed into a pillow. I let myself feel every ounce of the fear because I knew if I didn't, it would eat me alive. Then I got to work. The next morning, I drove into town and found a lawyer. A real one, not a friend of a friend, not a bargain bin ad from a phone pole. Her name was Carmen DeWitt, and she wore boots to her office and had a mug that said, "I like my coffee black and my arguments strong." I sat across from her in the cramped office, clutching the envelope of documents. She listened carefully as I told her everything. From the hidden letter to the bills and my name to the confrontation at the bookstore to the lawsuit. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and smiled grimly. "You're gonna be fine," she said. "They don't have a case. If anything, you could sue them." She helped me file a response. She sent official notices to the bank and county records to confirm the ownership of the cabin and the savings account. She found the original will that had been properly filed years ago, still intact and indisputable. It was, legally, an open and shut case. But Carmen advised me not to just play defense. If you want this to stop for good, she said, tapping her pen against her notebook, you're gonna have to go on the offense a little. I swallowed. Meaning what? Meaning, she said, we show them you're not scared. We hit back, publicly. A few weeks later, we had our court date. It wasn't some dramatic scene like on TV. No gavel slamming, no shouting across a courtroom. Just a small county courthouse, a handful of people, and a judge who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. My parents sat across the aisle from me, their faces stiff. Marjorie wore a black blazer like she was the wronged widow of a fortune. Philip couldn't meet my eyes. When the judge asked for opening remarks, their lawyer stumbled through a messy, emotion-laden speech about betrayal and family obligations. Then Carmen stood up. Calm. Methodical. She presented the original will. The certified bank records. The photos of the letter Grandpa had written. The confirmation that the property deed had been transferred to me years ago. And then, she dropped the explosive. She produced evidence of the pester. The prank calls. The false reports to my employer. The attempted identity theft to cancel my rental agreement. We had the dates, the phone records, even a voicemail that my old landlord had saved without deleting, Philip's unmistakable voice, pretending to be me. The judge's face darkened as he flipped through the file. When Carmen finished, the room was silent except for the soft click of the judge's pen against the desk. He cleared his throat. Frankly, he said, I'm surprised this case was even filed. He ruled in my favor immediately. The lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice, meaning they couldn't try to file it again. But it didn't end there. Carmen had filed a countersuit for pester, emotional distress, and defamation. She had advised me to be conservative, not greedy, but firm. We asked for enough to make a point. Enough to make them feel it. $25,000. To cover damages, lost wages, and emotional distress. It wasn't about getting rich. It was about consequences. The judge set a separate hearing for it. My parents' faces, when they realized they would now owe me money, were something I'll never forget. Philip went red, sputtering about ungrateful children and family betrayal. Marjorie looked like she might actually be sick right there on the courtroom floor. They tried to argue. They tried to deflect. They tried to sob. It didn't matter. The evidence spoke louder than their crocodile tears ever could. The settlement came a few months later. A quiet, bitter check from their lawyer's office. I didn't cash it right away. I let it sit on the mantel of the cabin for a week, just so I could see it every time I walked by. A trophy. Proof that I wasn't crazy. That I wasn't weak. When I finally deposited it, I used the money carefully. I replaced the leaky roof on the cabin. I invested some. I bought a second-hand but decent car to replace the dying Civic. And I started college courses online, part-time at first, then full-time as I settled into the new rhythm of my life. No debt. No one is breathing down my neck. No manipulation. Freedom. Real freedom. I never spoke to Marjorie or Philip again. They sent a few half-hearted letters later, guilt-tripping, manipulative nonsense, but I tossed them in the fire without reading past the first lines. They weren't sorry. They were just angry they lost. They were mourning the loss of their control, not the loss of their daughter. And I didn't mourn them. Not anymore. I had wasted enough tears on people who only saw me as a tool. Now, when I sit on the front porch at sunset, coffee mug warming my hands, I don't think about them. I think about Grandpa Walter. I think about the second chance he gave me. I think about the life I am building, slow, sturdy, and entirely my own. And I smile. Because for the first time in my life, I am not surviving. I am living.